All right, welcome back to the Net to Net podcast with the third episode of our NCAA podcast. To start the episode, I want to start talking about the recap from last week's game. There's a lot of games happening, a lot of big and cool and great games happening. So let's start with the earlier games. We have probably the first game, big notice, Georgia versus South Carolina. Georgia, South Carolina. It was played at Georgia. South Carolina started off really good. They were winning 14-3 going into halftime, and then Georgia scored 14-7 in the third and fourth quarter unanswered, which put them ahead. But we saw Georgia, and like I said in the last podcast, I wanted to see how Georgia plays against a really good defense and a big time team, because the last two games they really haven't played anyone good, and we saw kind of a strong performance under South Carolina for the first two quarters. Definitely impressed everybody, but kind of just was not existent in the second half. I think Georgia woke up. Yes, Georgia did lose some key guys in the first half, with Kendall Belton and Amarius Mims going down, to key contributors on the offensive side, and they were already missing two key weapons, one on the offense and one on the defense, which could have played a factor into it. But a really odd first half from Georgia, from the number one team in the country. And like I said, South Carolina is a good defensive team. They have some dogs on both sides of the ball, which are pretty good. Like Carson Beck struggled, I would say. Didn't struggle getting the ball out, just wasn't getting touchdowns, getting the results. Their run game was very good in the second half. DeJuan Edwards, leading rusher, with 118 on 20 carries for a touchdown. His longest run was a 20-yard run. And like I mentioned, the defense was a very defensive game from in the first half with South Carolina. The team combined for 2 sacks and 5 total tackles for a loss. And we saw this is a very different Georgia team. They lost a lot of starters from their title-winning squad. Yes, they still have Brock Bowers, but they did lose a lot of their key players. And I got to give it to him. Spencer Rattler had a game in the first half. He looked unstoppable, which we haven't really seen from him, just because he was supposed to be this next big Oklahoma quarterback. Struggled at Oklahoma for a couple of years, and then moved to South Carolina this last year, after losing his starting spot to Caleb Williams and a few other quarterbacks. And he looks pretty good. Yes, he threw 2 interceptions, but those, I believe, were second half interceptions when South Carolina kind of just like stopped playing. Like, they just did not look like the same team that came into the first half. But Georgia got the win, which keeps them on top for another week in the top number one team in the nation. So it'll be interesting how that affects how we look at Georgia going against stronger opponents. The next game is Michigan Bowling Green. That was an easy win for Michigan, 31-6. Not going to get too much into it, because we all knew that Michigan should have won, was supposed to win that game. So we all knew that was going to come. Another game that was actually close throughout the entire game was a big note is the number 3 team in the nation, Florida State versus Boston College. The game ended 31-29. Boston College had a chance to win it late, but Florida State managed to survive at the end of the game. They almost blew a 21-point lead, and they barely escaped, with the defense being able to just kind of closed things down at the end, but it was very close to comfort for a Florida State team that's 3-0. They have one conference win. Their biggest win so far this season was against number 5 LSU at the time. Jordan Travis put on another good game. He was 14 of 24 for about 222 yards, 2 touchdowns. We saw Johnny Wilson. He had an injury coming into the game, but didn't stop him. He had 105 yards on 4 receptions, longest of 44 yards. Jameel Bell kicked in for a touchdown and 76 yards. And then we just saw their defense. Their defense is honestly very underrated if you look at some of those guys that Florida State has. Like they were able to bring back Jared Verse back instead of him declaring for the draft, and he could be a top 5 potential defensive lineman drafted next year. He's really good. He had 1.5 sacks. They were getting pressure to the quarterback. They had about 10 TFLs, tackles for losses. They were just getting to the quarterback, putting pressure on Thomas Castellanos, who did not have a bad game. 20 of 33 for a 305 with 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He also did run for 95 yards and a touchdown, which is pretty insane. So all in all, Boston College looked pretty good. They're just unlucky to get the win at the end. I would say the performers of the game, DJ Ludy, played very well. He had an interception and a half a sack, and he also scored 2 touchdowns, which is kind of funny. Playing both sides of the ball. He had 1 touchdown, rushing, and then he also chipped in with an interception, like I mentioned. So he played both sides of the ball. Trey Benson had a good rotation with Trey Benson and Ronnie Hill. Still struggling to find that run game, I believe. Their run game hasn't looked that great. They've been really relying on Jordan Travis to get the ball out to Johnny Wilson, Jameer Bell, and Darian Williamson and Lawrence Toffoli. So if they can get their run game going, I think they're an all-around squad that could compete for within the national championship and get into the college football plays if they keep it up. Yes, I know they have to still play like the likes of Clemson and Notre Dame and stuff, but I think all in all, I think they have a chance to do it. They are a strong team. They have bounced back. Like I mentioned, sorry, they don't play Notre Dame this year, but they still have to play Clemson this coming week, and I'll get into that game. They still got to play Duke, Miami, and Florida at the end of the season. So they still have a decent schedule. And Virginia Tech's always a sneaky team, but we'll see how Florida State does and if they can keep it up. The next game to highlight from last week would be the Wyoming easy win. Wyoming played Texas. Easy win for Texas. It was 31-10. Ohio State won easily 63-10 against Western Kentucky. Those 2 games, obviously, Ohio State and Texas are supposed to win and dominate. Penn State got the dub against Illinois. And then probably another game that was big is Washington versus Michigan State. You have Michigan State's first game without Mel Tucker. Playing against the number 8 team in the country in Washington, and Michael Penix Jr., he's so familiar with Michigan State, playing a couple years at Indiana. Just had another field day to boost his stats for the Heisman, running 4 touchdowns on 27 of 35 passing for about 473. QBR rating of 98.2, which is insane. He also, and like I said, 4 touchdowns is insane. He was finding his favorite receiver, Romeo Udinese. He had 108 yards, and then finding Jalen Polk for 5 touchdowns, or 5 receptions for 118 in the touchdown. Defense looked good. They had 2 sacks the entire game, but tackles for losses. They had 7. They were getting to the quarterback. They picked off Noah Kim, who struggled today, 12 of 31 for 136. Michigan State, I don't know what it's been, but Michigan State has not looked the same over the last few years. They just haven't looked the same. I think there's just better teams in the Big Ten. But yeah, Washington and Michael Penix Jr. putting on another statement why he should be the Heisman winner, or why he is one of the favorites. And then you go and look at probably some of the notable games in the later games. You have Hawaii and Utah getting the dubs Utah and Oregon getting the dubs against Weber State and Hawaii, respectively. One of the biggest games to highlight is the Florida Gators beating Tennessee, who was ranked 11th. Tennessee just did not look good. Trevor Etienne, Joe Milton, they struggled in those games. And then probably the next game to highlight is at Bama with the weather delay, only winning 17-3, and we'll talk about them a little bit about going forward, how that team's going to go forward, and then probably the last game to highlight would be the overtime win for Colorado State, undefeated against their rivals, Colorado State University, in double OT. And then I caught the end of the game. We were watching, and it was just unbelievable game from Shedeur Sanders. Yes, Travis Hunter goes down and gets injured. He's out for 3 weeks, which we'll talk about in a little bit, how that will affect Colorado this week. But Colorado looked really good. So did Colorado State. Don't get me wrong; they both look pretty good. We talk about that it was a double OT win for them. Shedeur Sanders had 4 touchdowns again, which is insane for him. Shiloh Sanders also scored a touchdown as well with a pick. So both Sanders doing it on both sides of the ball. And then Braden Flower Nicholas, 34-47 for about 367 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But some of those interceptions were late in the game, which 2 of them were late in the game. But scored 1 interception for a touchdown from Shiloh, but he ran 80 yards. But yeah, I'm scared. Colorado is a good team. Yes, you don't have Travis Hunter, but for a couple weeks, but you still have one of my favorite receivers to watch is Xavier Weaver. 9 receptions, 98 yards for 1 touchdown. Michael Harrison chipped in for 2 touchdowns. Jimmy Horn Jr. chipped in for another touchdown. So they got dogs on all sides of the ball. And then the defense, you have the likes of Cameron Simmons Craig, Shiloh Sanders, Omari Cooper, Trevor Woods. You got so many dogs on that side of the ball that can do it for Deion. So definitely look out for them coming up. And then kind of pivoting to look at the games next week, some notable names. Or sorry, the last game I want to highlight before we move on. My alma mater, Cincinnati, lost in overtime to Miami, which is sad because we had 16 straight wins going into it for the victory bell, and it was a really bad performance from Cincinnati. I don't know what was going on with our team. We just did not. We looked lackadaisical. We couldn't get anything going. Yes, Emory Jones threw for 205, but he had 2 interceptions and no touchdowns throwing the ball. Brett Gabbert looked really good. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 12 of 20 for 237. I don't know what we were running the ball very well. Emory Jones and Ryan Montgomery ran for 100 yards plus. We were outside of Xavier Henderson, we really didn't have any receivers step up. We thought Braden Smith would step up, D. Williams would step up, but we know Emory Jones's favorite target is Xavier Henderson. He had 12 receptions for 140 with 0 touchdowns, but outside of him, we weren't getting the ball to anyone else. Our defense held up. It was just our offense couldn't get anything going. We saw good things from Deshaun Pace, who's one of our leaders, Malik Van. From Dante Corleone. So we just weren't getting enough pressure to Brett Gabbert, which he had so much time in the pocket watching that game. He was able to pick his teammates out, go through his progressions, a couple go routes, but it's just we're going through that weird change of new coach, a lot of new faces due to people going to the draft, people transferring and things like that. So hopefully we can fix it this coming week against Oklahoma, which I'll talk about them in a little bit. So now switching gears to go talk about this upcoming week's schedule. We have the likes of some big games. We have to start on Friday. We have the Purdue versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin with Braylon Allen should be able to get going. I'm I would pick Wisconsin. They're just a better team, I think, overall than Purdue is, and they have been for the last few years. And then the Saturday games is where there's some big names. So you got Michigan playing Rutgers. Michigan should easily beat Rutgers. I have no faith. I believe this week is when Jim Harbaugh's coming back. If not, he's back next week, but they haven't looked terrible without him. And then the first coming up game is Jordan Travis takes on Kay Kubik and Clemson. That's the next game. That's the morning. That's at the noon kickoff. Number 4 team goes in the Memorial Stadium in Clemson, so that should be a good game. If it's we'll get a really good game no matter what. But it just depends on what Clemson team shows up. If it's the Clemson team we saw last game, or if we see it's the first Clemson game that lost to Duke. Florida State is a good team. Like I mentioned, Johnny Wilson. They got a really good running back, Trey Benson. They have Jordan Travis. If you can contain Jordan Travis and make him have to run, get out of the pocket, because you know he can run with the ball, but he's not as great as moving out of the pocket. If you can get him out of the pocket, and get him running, and getting him running side to side instead of up and down vertically, you can stop him. You have to have that like quarterback spy with your Mike linebacker inside to kind of just watch him the entire game. But I would honestly favor Florida State in this one. The next game is my alma mater, Cincinnati. First game against Oklahoma, number 16 team at Nibbert Stadium. Big noon kickoff will be there, which is exciting for them. But it's tough to pick against Cincinnati because I love Cincinnati. It's my team, but I just think Oklahoma is just a stronger team. You have a really good team at Oklahoma. Brett Venables, the coach, coming over from Clemson last year. You have Dylan Gabriel, who is thrown for about 905, 11 touchdowns and 1 interception on 66 of 80 completion, which is insane. You have Emory Jones from our side, who's done pretty well this season, but it's just overall, it's just you look at it and Oklahoma's clearly favorites. They're better in total yards. They're better in yards allowed. Cincinnati gives up a ton of yards, especially in the running game. We've given up 109.7 and we've given up 197.7 in the passing game, which, and with the form we're on, losing to Miami is a crusher. With Oklahoma in the last 5, they are 3-2, with us being 2-3. So hopefully Cincinnati can bounce back. Hopefully we can get something going from our offense. But it's just Oklahoma's a really good team. They're 3-0. This is their first game in conference, so it'll be interesting to watch. But I just think Oklahoma's too overpowering for the Cincinnati Bearcats, which is sad to say. Next game coming up is you got Auburn, Texas A&M. Texas A&M's coming off that loss to Miami, which was actually insane. I didn't think Miami was going to win that, but hey, anything can happen in college football. Texas A&M, they have a bunch of 5 stars. They have 5 stars over the last few years, but they just can't get it going. And with Jimbo Fisher's on the hot seat, if they don't make the college football playoffs, I think, or stay within the top 10, if they stay on ranks for the rest of the season, I think Jimbo Fisher doesn't have a job at the end of the season, which is shocking because Jimbo Fisher is a really good coach. He's really good at recruiting. It's just he can't put it together at Texas A&M since he left. And you see the success that Florida State's been having, which all the way back then, I think Jimbo Fisher leaving from Florida State to Texas A&M was a bad decision. And I remember saying that to my friends when it happened. I just thought it was a bad idea. Auburn, they're just there. They're a decent team. They're 3-0. Really haven't put anyone huge of name. Cal, they barely beat Cal, and they beat Sam. They beat Samford Bulldogs easily, which was expected, but only beating Cal by 4 points, so it's kind of interesting to see. So we'll see what Auburn team shows up. But like I said, Texas A&M. Let's see how if it's the same team that shows up that lost to Miami, or this team that showed up and played against I believe it was um, Louisiana Monroe. So we'll see. And then the next game you have coming up, which I'm very excited for, is the on ABC at 3 p.m. Colorado, number 19 in the country, versus number 10 Oregon. You got some big shakeups coming within the top 25, which I'll mention later with those standings. But Oregon looked very good offensively last game, but there is that error on the defense side. You've seen those holes in those areas that aren't there right now. We lost, like I said, we lost Justin Flau last season or this season to a transfer. We lost Noah Sewell. Those are our two starting Mike linebackers. We lose the likes of DJ Johnson coming off the edge. We lose a Bennett Williams and a a Bennett Williams in the secondary. Who was our leader, one of our leaders. We lose a lot of those kind of talent we've lost over the last few years, to even too with like Javon Holland, Verone McKinley, Kayvon Thibodeau a few years back. So you can see the holes and the errors, but our offense looks solid. Bo Nix is a very accurate passer. He's been very accurate over the last few games. It's just this is going to be a big test, especially it being in Oregon, which I give the slight edge to Oregon just because it's in Eugene. It's in the Aztoon Stadium. Oregon's very good at home, and that stadium gets loud. You can't. Talking to people that have gone to that stadium and been in those types of environments and watching that game, it gets loud in there and you can't hear anything. So I think Colorado's going to struggle, especially without Travis Hunter, who can play both sides of the ball and give you that versatility. He's out 3 weeks. They're really going to miss him, but if they shut down Xavier Woods, I think they have a chance. On Oregon's defense, if they can just fix those and plug those holes that we saw during the last few games, I think we'll be okay. And then the next game, number 11 Utah take on the number 22 UCLA Bruins. That's another top 25 matchup. Utah, let's see if Cameron Rising plays. I doubt if he does or not. But so far, Utah hasn't looked bad. They're undefeated. They look refreshed. Nico Johnson hasn't looked bad. But we'll see how they do. They're kind of on a winning streak. They beat Baylor. They beat Weber State, with UCLA beating San Diego State and CCU. They're both 3-0. Haven't played a conference game yet, so it should be interesting to see how they do. I slightly favor Utah. I just think Utah, if Cameron Rising can play, they're going to be phenomenal. Dante Moore, a very good freshman quarterback. I liked him coming out of high school. He was going to commit to Oregon, but he decommitted once Bo Nix decided to stay another year and transferred. And he recommitted to UCLA, and he's looked 7 touchdowns, 1 interception for about 615 yards on 32 of 51 passing, which is not bad. He's a freshman. He's going to have those games where he's good and then have those games where he's not playing well, and that's just the inexperience of a first year playing. So it'll be interesting to see, but I slightly take Utah on this one. Yes, UCLA has lost a lot of players. They don't have DTR anymore. They don't have Zach Charbonnet, the running back game, so it'll be interesting, but they've done well throughout the first 3 weeks. And then some other notable games. The later games, we get down to it. Then you have the likes of Oregon State, Washington State, Cameron Ward against DJ Uiagalelei. DJ Uiagalelei's looked phenomenal this year, leading Oregon State to number 14 in the country, and then Washington State with Cameron Ward, who I liked last year. And he's one I thought he was going to go to the draft last year, which I like that he didn't, because he gets another year to develop as a pocket passing quarterback, because you know what he can do with his feet, and we saw that against Wisconsin. I like Oregon State, but I could see Washington State winning this. The next game, probably of two of note later on, is the Ohio State Notre Dame game in South Bend at 8:30. College Game Day, I believe, will be at that game, but I think Ohio State's going to take the L tonight. Yes, their defense has improved, but their offense has struggled against big teams. Yes, they played Western Kentucky, and they easily beat them. But then look how they struggle against Indiana. Notre Dame's one of the best offenses in the league. They have Sam Hartman, who's having an unbelievable season. He's probably one of my favorites to win the Heisman um, at with 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They have the leading rusher in college football in Audric Estime. They have Chris Tyrese, who's very versatile. But yes, looking at Ohio State, they have Travion Henderson. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. They got Epic Kambu. They have Kyle McCord, who struggled, but he is their quarterback. They have Julian Fleming still. They had Case Stewart. They have a really good defense led by Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, which I could see Ohio State winning, but I also could see them losing to Notre Dame. I think it'll be a close one. I think it's going to be within 7 points. And to be honest, I've been talking to my friends and saying, like, I think Ohio State might lose this game, but I'm going to slightly give it to Ohio State, just slightly, to win with 7 points or less against Notre Dame. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a real defensive battle. But if they can shut down Sam Hartman, I think this is going to be the best defense that Sam Hartman's played so far this season, and it'll be interesting. And then the other game that's at the same time, Penn State number 7 versus number 24 Iowa. Penn State's look pretty good. I favor Penn State in this one over Iowa. I just think Penn State with head coach James Franklin, who's one of the best college coaches in college football. They have the likes of sophomore quarterback Drew Aller from Medina, Ohio, actually, who's not looked bad. He hasn't turned the ball over that much. He's very smart with his reads and his progressions. You still have the likes of Ketron Allen, the sophomore running back, who is pretty good this season. He's 2 touchdowns for about 208, but he's a very good receiving back, and he's actually a good run blocker in the run game. So I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State easily beats Iowa, but I wouldn't rank out Iowa. They are still a good team. And then the later games, you have North Carolina, Pittsburgh. I think North Carolina's run ends here. I just think Pittsburgh's just a little slightly better. And then the later games, USC take on Arizona State, and Washington, number 8, take on Cal, which I expect USC and Washington to win both games. Both to win their games respectively. I just think Caleb Williams is unstoppable, and so is Michael Penix, the 2 favorites right now to win the Heisman. With that being said, kind of switching the gears now to the top 25 rankings. And this week they had Georgia at 1, which I totally agree with. Michigan, yes. Texas, yes. Florida State actually moved down. And Texas switched spots. So they both switched spots, which I can see why. Texas came off a good win the week prior against, I believe it was Wyoming, easily 31-10 win, like I mentioned. But Florida State, I can see why, because they struggled to beat Boston College, which they thought it was going to be a steamroll, but we know Florida State in the past. That's usually how they are against some of those teams. They'll play down to their competition, which is normal for them to do because we've seen in the past. USC and then Ohio State at 6, Penn State at 7, Washington at 8, Notre Dame at 9. I totally agree with. Oregon jumped 3 spots to number 10. I think that is kind of where they're at because, yes, they beat Texas Tech at the last game of the play. They won by 8. So that was their biggest test, but we'll see how much they jump if they beat Colorado. I think if they do beat them, I think they will jump higher. Utah up 1 spot to 11. LSU back up 2 spots to 2. Bama dropped 3 spots from 10 to 13, which we're going to talk about. So Bama is that team that right now we don't know what's going on with them. Like I mentioned on the last podcast, Bama decided to bench Jalen Milroe and go with Ty Bucher, the quarterback who transferred from Notre Dame, followed his OC to Bama. Starts against South Florida. And we're going, okay, so they're going to I think this will be. I was like, yeah, they're going to be good. He's a familiar quarterback they've worked with before, and that he's worked with in the past. To see his OC from Notre Dame comes, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I think Bama. I think they just need to change it. He comes in 5 of 14 for 34 yards, no touchdowns, no interception. He averaged 2.4 yards, which I'm going, what is going on? Like you have your OC that you excelled with last year, but now you're struggling with probably better players around you, and you have the same OC you had last year, and just kind of like a thing last year in 2022. It was okay. 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, for 651 yards on 46 of 83 attempts. That's not terrible, but you're still with a familiar OC that knows you and knows how you play and can get the best out of you. And we're sitting here going, okay, we're going to give him a chance. Yes, there was a big delay, but it was a disaster. A disaster from Tyler Buchner. Buckner. And so then they come out of the delay and they start Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson comes in 5 and 9, 73 yards, averaged 8.1 yards a throw, but 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. It was all in the run game between Roddy Williams, who had 17 of 129 carries and 1 touchdown, and you had Jace McClellan, that Jahmyr Gibbs replacement, 13 for 74. They could not get the ball out of with the quarterback. Their quarterback struggled. And now your defense played a pretty good game. Dallas Turner, one of your best rushers, 2.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. Jalen Keys shipped in for 4 tackles. They're slowly Kool-Aid, McKitchery had a fumble recovery or a forced fumble. Yes, you have Malachi Moore, who played very well since he's came back from injury. It was really your defense kind of held you in this game because your offense was not outside your running backs. Your offense wasn't giving you anything. Ty Simpson and Tyler Buchanan looked terrible. So now my thing is, and don't even mention that South Florida got to the quarterback 5 times. 5 times. They both defense. It was a defensive game. They both had 5 sacks each. But you look at it and go, what is your defense do? What was your offense doing? Your Ty Simpson and Buchner weren't giving you anything. So now you're going to go up against the number who actually I barely touched on it, who are now going to go up against 3-0, the number 22 ranked team in the country, and Ole Miss, or sorry, number 15 team in the country, Ole Miss, and you're number 13. You're 2-1, and they're 3-0. And you're going back to Jalen Milrose, who hasn't looked bad, but he has struggled. But you forget, he's only played 2 games. One of them was against Middletown, Tennessee, or whatever it was, and easily beat them. And then played Texas, Texas is one of the best teams in the country right now, and he struggled. If I'm not mistaken, let me tell you what his stats was against Texas. And yes, Texas, like I said, Texas is a really good defense, but 14 to 27 for 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. I believe he was also sacked a bunch. And you look at it, he struggled on. They struggled on third down efficiency. They were 5 of 14. They couldn't really get first downs. They had only 18. Yes, like I mentioned, he had 2 interceptions. Which that do great for them. But you look at it, yes, like I said, Texas is a good team, but you're supposed to be Bama. You've been a dynasty for a long time, and this is what happens. You have good recruiting classes every year, and is the dynasty over? Is this it for Saban? No, we shouldn't be saying that yet. We still got a long season to go, but there is some growing pains with this team if you look at it. Texas got to the quarterback 5 times. They're also, let's be real, Bama's defense was non-existent. They got 0 sacks to the quarterback. They let Quinn Ewers have a day. He had all the time in the world, but Texas's defense was getting to him, which something is wrong with Bama. I think they just, yes, they lost Bill O'Brien. They brought in their new OC from, I forget his name, but they brought him in from Notre Dame. But even though they did that, I still think they're struggling. They're struggling to find who they are and their identity. And I think that happens when you lose a lot of your players on the offense and defense side of the ball. And that happens for every team. But if this is the team that came out against Texas, comes out against Ole Miss is winning this game. Bama's still the favorites. They're about 66% favorites. But don't count out Ole Miss. Jackson Dart has looked good through 3 games. 7 touchdowns, 852 yards, 1 interception. He's looked good. I've actually liked Jackson Dart for a while. I liked him when he was at USC. I thought he just didn't get the chance there because Caleb Williams came in and all that issues with Lincoln Riley. Didn't want him as his quarterback. He wanted Caleb Williams, which is respectable because Caleb Williams is a dog. But if Alabama can't do it, if they get another loss, I think it'll pretty much be over for the college football players. A 2-loss team is not getting in. So that is where I'm at with Bama if they can't pick it up. I forgot to highlight them, but I'm glad I spent a little more time with them because I think that's like the biggest takeaway from is Bama on that decline. We saw Clemson start kind of taking the steps that aren't showing that their dynasty's over. But they have one of the best coaches in Dabo Swinney, so you think, oh, the dynasty's not over yet. But you saw how they were against Duke. They couldn't get anything going. And Duke, once again, Duke's not known for football. They're known for basketball. They're a basketball school. So kind of going off of that, I want to touch on my Heisman watches, my who I like right now, and my top 3 haven't changed. It's still Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., and Sam Hartman. And then I would say probably Shador Sanders, Bo Nix are behind with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Audric Estime. I think he should be up there. He's the best rusher in college football right now. I like him a lot. We didn't expect it, but those are probably my favorites right now just because those are the guys I expect to do something. I thought Drake May would be up there, but it's just not there yet. He's kind of struggled of late at North Carolina, but JJ McCarthy I think is up there as well. But you see a lot, like I mentioned last week, it's a lot of the Pac-12 boys are in the top 10, and you look at it from that perspective. A lot of the good quarterbacks are coming out of the big Pac-12, which is really funny because the Pac-12 is not going to last after this year. But I think those are my personal favorites, but I know people have Jordan Travis up there, Quinn Ewers, J.J. McCarthy, like I mentioned. Drake. Some people still haven't given up on Drake May yet. You have Drew Aller coming in, starting to slip in from Penn State, and then I think Marvin Harris Jr. will still always be there. He puts up ridiculous numbers. It's just, can Ohio State get him going, especially if he has a big game against Notre Dame and South Bend away from home? I think will help his chances, but there's so many options. I think the still favorite, it has to be Caleb Williams. He's had an unbelievable season so far. They had a bye week last week, but they're back against Arizona State. So you know what he's been able to do for the most part, which he gets the job done. And then we're 3 weeks in. I've been able to kind of digest the season, and I'm ready to give my predictions for who I think will make the college football playoffs, the 4 teams. So, we'll recap this when the season comes to the time of naming the college football playoffs. But through 3 weeks, who I have, number 1 has to be Georgia. They're 3-0. They have the most points from the AP polls. They've had 57 votes. I just think they're the reigning champs. They have to be number 1. Number 2, I'm gonna go with Texas over Michigan right now, just because Texas has that win against Bama. Yes, Bama, it hasn't looked good of late, but it's still, Bama was number 3 in the nation when Texas was 11 and they beat them. So I'm going Texas too, but my only thing is, can Texas withstand that throughout the season? That's why we're going to keep looking back throughout the season and giving my predictions based off of each week. I just wanted to take the first 3 weeks to kind of look at all the teams observed, because some teams play good teams and some will just play like those Portland State games like Oregon did and smoke them and things like that, or Western Kentucky that like Ohio State played. So three games is a good starting point, and then I would say number 3, Michigan. They look good. J.J. McCarthy, one of the favorites for the Heisman, and then I would go number 5. Well, I'm gonna go USC. Yes, Florida State's ranked higher than them. They're in 4th. USC's in 5th. I just think Caleb Williams, USC just looks. I think if they played against each other right now, I think USC would roll over Florida State. Yes, Jordan Travis is good quarterback. He can lead the team, and you have the likes of Johnny Williams and Trey Benson and Rodellus Williams, but USC is unstoppable. You have Lincoln Riley, who's one of the best coaches in college football. I think I've been saying that for a lot of coaches, but some are legitimately too. With just the team around Caleb is insane. You have Marshawn Lloyd, you have Tyjae Washington, you have Quentin Joyner, you have Austin Jones, you have the transfer Brendan Rice came over from Colorado, you have Mario Williams, you have, like I mentioned, Marshawn Lloyd, you have Tyjae Washington, like I mentioned, Deuce Robinson is another name. And then on the defensive side, you got Jalen Smith, Shane Lee, Bryson Shaw, Max Williams. You have so many dogs on the other side, just to name a few, and just all around team is so good, and I would just be too afraid to play them, which unfortunately I definitely would not want to play USC. I think the rankings will change throughout the season, and I'll keep giving you up. I'm not being biased. That's why I have not put Oregon or Cincinnati, my 2 favorite teams. With these, you just have to be so realistic, and you can't have those fan goggles on when we do these. You have to have your commentary, your analyzing goggles on, and look at it from all areas: strength of schedule, team opponents they've played so far. Maybe it changes with how Oregon does against Colorado, a ranked team, probably their toughest game so far after this week. So a lot of things will be shaken up within the top 25 after this week. I'm very excited to get to watch those games this Saturday and then get back to you guys with the recap and what I thought about this week. So keep a lookout for my next NFL video, and also keep a lookout for our next soccer video with the boys. And basketball will be coming soon. Hopefully we'll have more guests on throughout the show. If you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. All of our videos up to date are on both. If you want to watch our videos on YouTube and you can like see our faces and facial reaction, go ahead and check those out. If you just don't have time to watch them, but you have time to listen to them, like if you're driving or doing something, hit us on Spotify and let us know in the comments if what you guys want us to talk about more, focus on certain teams and players and whatnot, or what guests we should bring on, because I think we want to bring in a lot of guests this year. So definitely take a listen, and I'll see y'all soon, and peace.